the future foreign leader, either in India or globally, is going to be far more volatile and far more uncertain, complex and ambiguous than what has been in the past. In other words, we are living in a VUCA world where we will be confounded with ever-increasing volatility and uncertainty in our business world. In addition to this growing chaos, I think there are some trends which are clearly visible. The first trend that I see for the future is the growing global imbalance. Today, the developing world or the emerging economies constitute more than 50% of the global GDP on a purchase parity basis. Many countries in the emerging world are reaching a large company status, which is a turnover of $1 billion. There is a research by McKinsey which has been done that today of the 8,000 companies, only a very small fraction of those companies, about 14% of them, belong to the emerging world. But by 2025, it is estimated that 7 out of the 10 new companies that happen, 7,000 new companies which come between now and 2025, will be from the emerging world. What would this mean for leaders in countries like India and China? It would mean that these people would now need to be having a far better and a sharper global outlook than what they possessed in the past. In addition to having a global outlook, leaders from countries like India would need to exhibit a far greater cultural sensitivity than what they would have displayed in the past. As also, they should be ready for greater global mobility. So that's the first trend that I see globally. The second trend that I see globally is the difference in the demographics across the various geographies. As Japan is graying slowly, countries like India are becoming younger. There is a demographic dividend which is happening in South Asia, and in countries like India, 60% of the population is below 30 years old. So this raises the issue that we will have far greater proportion of working population compared to a country like Japan. So this would throw a lot of challenges for the leaders, because the bulk of the population would be the millennials, the youngsters who would be 30 years or less in any company that they would run. So all the policies, the HR policies would need to be tailored to engage and better satisfy the youngsters than what we have today. The third trend related with these global demographics is the growing individualization. The Twitter, the Facebook, the LinkedIn is giving rise to a generation which is embracing individualization like never before. So again, this would throw a new challenge for leaders in the future. And last but not the least, which is related to this, is the embracing of the digital native. Today, a large number of the population which was going to join or is just about to join the workforce are people who have born with the internet, who have grown with the internet, who have grown with social media like Facebook. And the way they would interact and collaborate with leaders in the future would be very different from the way it happened in the past. The first thought that comes to my mind is the ability to take decisions under this uncertain environment. The first caution that leaders would need to exercise is not to take decisions under gut, or as they call it, with intuition. The decisions would need to be measured, And also the second trap that they should not get into is that the past experience may not be the best guide for the future outcomes. What leaders would need to do is create a culture of constructive skepticism and surround themselves with people who will, number one, challenge them, and number two, and more importantly, provide them with multiple perspectives. In the Indian context, if I were to take it further, this would mean a big change, a big shift, because traditionally Indian society has been very reverential. We don't normally in our households challenge our elders. So it is the trick and the skill of the leader to encourage dissent and invite suggestions from people, even though this may not fit into his or her line of thinking. I will now go on to the second point in terms of the skills of a future leader. And I call this that the future leader would have to be a telescope as well as a microscope. He will need to operate out of both the lenses. No longer is one lens sufficient. He has to be far-sighted and he has to be near-sighted. He has to be able to see the big picture, see the trends which no one is able to see, and also should be rooted in reality, should have his or her feet firmly planted on the ground and see the reality under intense magnification. The third point is on authenticity or quiet transparency. The days of a rock star, a celebrity CEO or a celebrity leader are well and truly over. No longer in this changing environment would organizations be dependent on one or two people at the top for strategy. I think we are well entering, and that has been discussed along detail, we are well entering into an era where collaboration is the new mantra. Working along with the people is the new recipe for success. The leader will have to be more authentic. He will not have all the answers, but he should have the ability to ask the right questions. And also the humility to accept some of his or her vulnerability. The fourth point is the leader needs to be a tri-sector athlete. What I mean by tri-sector, she would have to straddle the public domain, the private domain, and the social domain. So a lot more transparency is coming from the regulatory framework. The regulatory framework is becoming more transparent, it demands greater transparency as it is becoming much more robust. And then we are seeing the rise of civil movement. Look at the rise of Anna Hazare. Look at the rise of the Aam Aadmi Party in Delhi, which is making a huge impact on the way politics is done in this country. This will have a very big impact on how ultimately the business is conducted, because they will demand accountability from the business. They will demand transparency from the business, and the business leader would need to be ready for doing that. The next point which I want to make is that, and that's the last point, is that leaders would need to be able and adept at fighting fires much more frequently than what they have done in the past. There would be a new fire almost every day, and leaders would need to have the calmness of mind, the courage of conviction and thought to deal with these everyday fires. it will be quite a challenge to take time out to think about business strategy, to think about developing people, to think about leading people when there are so many fires to be put out. In short, leaders would need to be superhuman beings. The purpose of the leadership development is to prepare the organization for a leadership pipeline. That means that we, starting from the entry-level engineer to the CEO, we are able to build a robust leadership pipeline. Now, what is the basis of this leadership pipeline? Or what are the various stages in this leadership pipeline? The base of the leadership pipeline is the individual contributor. So these are the young, intelligent, analytical engineers that we have, let's say in L&T, who form the backbone of the organization. This is the large mass of people with about 4 to 5 years of experience. The first transition that takes place is when they become team leaders. So at this stage, they need to learn how to measure performance, how to build teams, how to develop teams, how to coach, how to motivate. All these skills become very important at this level of leadership. The next transition in the leadership pipeline happens from a team leader to a functional leader. At this stage, she needs to learn how to develop a business acumen, how to drive change, how to network with other functional leaders. Again, we repeat the same process through mentoring, proper job selection, through classroom training. And then when these people graduate into strategic levels, the role of mentoring then becomes even more critical. And obviously supplemented by classroom programs. And the way we have done our classroom programs is that we have got the best in class faculty from the best business schools in India and internationally. All our strategic leadership development programs are run by international business schools. But all our base management development programs are run by IIMs. For example, the MDP on Team Excellence, the Management Development Program on Team Excellence, is run by IIM Bangalore. Our MDP on Operational Excellence is run by IIM Calcutta. Our strategic programs are run by Ross Business School, Michigan, are run by INSEAD, and are run by Harvard Business School. At the end of the day, we try and give a mix of classroom training, mentoring by senior leadership team, and challenging assignments to the people so that we are able to groom leaders to the job requirement that we have. The last point which I want to mention in the leadership development is that we are a growing international organization. So we want to groom leaders for international roles globally, and that's not easy. In our experience, people who have only stayed in India and have been asked to take about leadership positions internationally with some of the large clients like Shell, BP, or Petronas, or Saudi Aramco, people have, in a way, to an extent faltered because the gap, the expectation gap was large. So we are trying to plug this gap by bringing them under the tutelage of an experienced global leader, which may have to be hired from outside. And then they pick up the nuances of working globally, and within no time or within a very little time, they are ready. So our entire strategy has been to build leaders for international businesses, and we have been fairly successful in it. So one of the most important tools, useful tools that we have found out with our experience is the breakthrough learning project, the BLP as we call it. The advantage of using a technique like BLP is that you are doing this in a controlled environment, and it allows the participant to experiment without any downside. So there are no major risks if the decision clicks or does not click. But it gives him relevant lessons if he were to jump into the real world. So how does this BLP work? BLP, Breakthrough Learning Project, is a project which is thoughtfully given to an individual to meet a business need as well as an individual need. So the individual need comes out of the 360 degrees appraisal, and the business need comes from the business that he is in. And it has to be smart, obviously. Okay? So let me give you an example. We had an individual who was working in construction, but who was high potential, and we wanted to give him an international experience. So we gave this individual a project to write a feasibility report about entering the CIS and the African market. So he traveled, he went to countries like Turkmenistan and prepared an entry strategy for L&T into these countries. And he shared it with his team, with his business heads, and by the time he finished his project, he had a very good understanding of what he needed to do and what were the first steps if L&T were indeed to go into that area. For example, what is the competition looking like? What is the government regulatory framework looks like? What are the precautions that we need to take? What is the risk environment politically and economically in that country? So he was fully prepared, before he could take on that formal role, and this BLP helped him to come on to speed. Summing up, I would say that leadership development done in a structured, systematic manner helps to cut out some of the risks that naturally come in this volatile, uncertain, ambiguous environment.